very good. Let's progress on. We're going to be on step number 3 now. So we've used our language.properties to localize our application. Next up, we're going to take a look at creating some MVC commands. We're going to create one just to kind of get the motions and the idea. We're going to bring in the rest from the snippets, and we'll take a peek at a couple of different ones to solidify the concept. So back down to our snippets. Oh, sorry, a little bit ahead of myself. So let's go ahead. We're going to start off by creating our MVC command. This is going to be an MVC render command used to render the submissions view. So when someone creates an assignment within our application, we want to be able to see the submissions that go with it. So what the logic is going to be is we're going to be rendering another JSP, and the way that we do that is with an MVC render command. So we'll start off by creating that MVC render command class. I'm going to right click the source main Java, heading over to new, and then class. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put this class within a specific package. So I'm going to click the browse button, and we'll select up to Liferay Training Gradebook Web Portlet. So the web portlet, and then we're going to tack on or append .action after the portlet. So Liferay Training Gradebook Web Portlet is what we're going to select first. Once it's selected, here at the end of portlet, I'm going to type .action. So we're creating a new package along the way. Now we need to put our Java class within that package. We're going to be calling it view submission MVC render command. Right? And from our discussion, we know that in order to create this MVC render command, we need to implement that interface, MVC render command. So let's go ahead and click on that add button that lines up with interfaces. And let's look for our MVC render command like so. So MVC render command. From here, let's go ahead and click finish. And we've created our MVC render command class that implements that interface, MVC render command. All right, now before we press on, let's do a little bit of touch up here within our method signature of render. We have arg0 and arg1. These names aren't too meaningful to us, so let's make them something more meaningful. So for arg1, this object is going to be the render request object, so why not call it the render request object? Render request like so. Same with the render response. This is going to be our render response object. Right. Personally, I like to use request and response as the name, but it does take a little bit more to actually read and then see what type of request or response it is. With render request, render response, right? There's no ambiguity on what the request response object is. Anyways, before I rant on too much, let's go ahead and make this a component. So to make this a component, we're going to add the @component annotation up here at the top, and we'll specify a few attributes here, right? All right, so the first attribute is immediate equals true, right? Telling the component to start up as soon as you can. The property element, right? Setting properties for our component. And then last but not least, this part is optional, but in the Liferay world, we like to be explicit in registering the component. Since we're directly implementing it, this isn't necessary, but again, we like to be explicit here, registering the component as a service that implements MVC render command. I'm going to use Control-Shift-O to bring in the import for the component annotation, taking care of that. All right, so here within the property element, with our MVC commands, we always need to specify two properties. So the first property is the name of the portlet that I'm listening to, javax.name.portlet equals. And then the second property is going to be what's that parameter that I'm listening for, right? The technical name of that parameter is the MVC command name. So first part we know is, which portlet are we listening for a render request from, since this is a render command. And we know that, right? It's going to be the gradebook portlet. So the name of the gradebook portlet is abstracted out in a class called gradebook portlet keys. Right? Using dot. Autocomplete's our best friend. If it doesn't show up, you can use control spacebar to make it show up. Right? So selecting gradebook there, so that's first. Now, in the real world, we are the ones who determine what these MVC command names are. Here in the training, though, we have to kind of adhere to what's already set out for us. So the name of the command is going to be /gradebook /submission /view. So /gradebook /submission /view. So that takes care of the two properties that need to be specified within the component annotation. Last thing here is we use our MVC commands to render a specific JSP. So the essence of this is going to be here within the return statement. All we need to do is specify what JSP are we going to be rendering. Now, to give some context or a little bit more here, the source or the root level here is going to be source main resources meta-inf resources. So the return statement and the directory we provide is relative to the second resources. So if I wanted to render the view.jsp, I'd just say view.jsp, right, as a string like this. Okay, but we're going to be doing a little bit more than that. So we're going to be rendering a JSP that we'll create later. So make sure you throw your quotes there. So this JSP is going to be in a folder called submission. And then the name of the JSP itself is view_submission singular .jsp. And then we'll save the file. So this is our MVC command that's being used to handle our render URLs, render requests coming through. We're listening for render requests coming in from the gradebook portlet, and there's going to be a parameter called gradebook submission view that we're listening for specifically. So we're going to be here in step number 3. So let's collapse step number 2. Here in step number 3, I'm going to head over to our gradebook web. And here in the gradebook web, I'm going to select our build.gradle. Now from the build.gradle, I'm going to be selecting pretty much everything here. So go ahead and highlight everything. You can copy, or you can copy the build.gradle itself. I'll leave the choice up to you. Scrolling back up to our gradebook web, what we're going to do is head into the build.gradle that corresponds with the gradebook web. And be careful here, right? We have these two build.gradles right next to each other. We want the one that is corresponding with the gradebook web. So inside build.gradle, I'll go ahead and highlight everything. We'll say goodbye and then replace it with the contents of the snippet build.gradle. The one thing I want to highlight here is we're saying we have a dependency on the gradebook API project. So anything that the gradebook API is exporting, we're going to be bringing in. Gradle is helping us out with that. All right, and again for me, I have the habit of always doing Gradle refresh afterwards. We saw in practice in this example here, right? You don't have to, but it's my habit. I like to go through it. All right, next thing we're going to do is we're going to be copying a bunch of classes from our snippets. So let's go ahead and get started with that. I'm going to scroll down, right? And we're we're still here in step number 3. So we'll start with the gradebook API. Sorry, let's start with the gradebook web since I already have it expanded out. So we'll head over to the source main Java, com, Liferay, training, gradebook, web, and there's going to be a couple of things that we're going to need to do here. What I'm going to start off with is I'm going to select the display folder. So I'm going to copy the display folder. I'm going to paste it in the same directory that we are copying it from, but within our gradebook web project. So what I mean by that, as I scroll back up, is I'm going to select the source folder, the single one by itself, and just kind of follow along. Source main Java, com, Liferay training, gradebook, web, and I'm going to paste that display folder here within the web. It does introduce a few errors, and that's okay. Not too big of a deal. Going back down to my snippets, I'm going to go into the constants folder, and I'm going to copy the MVC command names. So I'll copy MVC command names. We'll scroll back up, and I'm going to paste that inside the constants folder that corresponds with my own project. All right, scrolling back down to my snippets. Last thing I'm going to do here is within my portlet folder, we have action and template. Let's do the hard part first. Opening up action, there's a bunch of things here. I'm going to go ahead and select all of them. So a lot of action commands, a lot of render commands. Using Control-C to copy them, we'll scroll back up to its corresponding folder that's under portlet and then action. I'm going to paste all of that there. All right, let's scroll back down. We have one more folder here that we need to take care of. It's going to be this template folder, and we see it's just going to go into the portlet folder. So I'll go ahead and do that. So scrolling back up, it's going to go into the portlet folder. So I'll paste it here within the portlet folder. All right. We have a couple more things that we need to copy and paste from the gradebook web. So we finished all of the things in the Java folder. Now we're going to head down here to the resources folder. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to copy the com folder right there. So source main resources, I'm going to copy the com folder, and we'll scroll back up to our project, and we're going to paste it in its corresponding folder. So we're going to paste it here in resources like so. Let's head back down to our snippets. And then under the com folder. Okay, so let's take a look at what we just did. Let's scroll back up to our project, and we'll start with the Java classes. So one of the first things, starting from the top, is with this MVC command names. We abstracted out a lot of the command names into their own constants, as we see here, right? Just is going to make life a little bit easier, so we don't have to reference these guys here on the right. It can be a little bit difficult. Again, we like to do this in Liferay just to make things easier on ourselves. Next up, we have a couple of classes here that are going to be used a little bit later. This is going to be used when we start dealing with the actual UI, and we're going to be implementing the UI part using Clay. So we're going to have a management toolbar, and that's going to be implemented using Clay. This is for our assignments as well as for our submissions. All right. Next up, gradebook portlet. Nothing too different here, right? Same old, same old. So portlet actions, these are all of our MVC commands, and we've created MVC commands for all of our common operations. So things like adding, deleting, editing, and so on, that's all implemented within our various MVC commands. So we'll take a peek at one. like add assignment, for example, right? We are extending base MVC action command, right? The two properties we need to specify. Which portlet are we listening to? What parameter are we listening for? After that, we will implement the doProcessAction method to do whatever it is that we need to do. All right. And so each one of these is going to be set in this way. Right. Same with edit assignment render command. We do take the opportunity during the render phase or the render method to do some additional logic, grab some parameters, do some checking along the way before actually rendering the JSP itself. Right. So feel free to take some time and look through the rest of these. Right. But again, just highlighting a couple of them along the way. Right. Down here under the template, we're going to make our application ADT compliant. So the gradebook portlet, the gradebook application will be able to handle ADTs. ADTs, as we'll discuss a little bit later, is used to configure or control the way an application is able to display its content. We do so using a template, either a free marker or velocity template. This empowers our front-end developers, our front-end people to be able to tweak the way the gradebook portlet in this example displays our assignments and submissions without having to modify the JSPs. So it kind of makes our lives easier. Right, over here in the resources, the first place is with the template, right? We're using some templates here so that we can display some help to whoever's creating an ADT for our application. On top of that, under the meta-inf folder, resources, we still need to add some of those JSPs. So let me take a look here and just double check. Content, we're not quite there yet. That's going to be the next step.